Has the home builder scheme done its job too well?
Houston, we have a problem.
The building industry is in crisis. House builds are taking twice as long and they're going to cost you an extra 10%. Insiders are warning the industry is unhealthy and anyone planning to build or renovate should wait. So in this video, we're going to cover an in-depth review of the building crisis and what it could mean for you if you're thinking about building. We'll also look at the risks of building a home in the current market. And finally, we'll answer the question, should you build a home in 2021? But before we get this video started, if you find it helpful in any way, do me a little favor and hit that like button below or leave a comment. Just a little gesture like that makes a huge difference to the channel. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button below. Thanks you guys, it really means a lot. So let's dive in. So how did this actually happen? How did we go from a situation where it was actually cheaper to build a home than buy an existing one? It's a perfect storm of conditions. On the front end, demand. A record 146,000 new detached homes were set to be built in 2021, which is a 20% increase on previous figures. Not to mention HomeBuilder was a complete runaway success with more than 121,000 applications nationally. Not to mention a combination of other factors. There's been weather damage nationally, there's been interstate COVID refugees, people moving around, and also an international construction boom, which has put more pressure on prices. According to CommSec, renovation loans increased 7.4% in June, hitting a 19-year record high. So some of the factors that have pushed these conditions include material availability, increase in costs, the cost regulation, and the shortage of construction labor. You can't get into the country, so we're having to use all the people here. So we're building more and more homes than ever before, and materials are at an all-time shortage. But just how bad can it be? In new contracts, that could see an overall increase of $50,000 on the cost of building. Builders are saying they've got price rises that are completely unprecedented. In some cases, we've seen builders report price rises of between 30 to 40% on some products over the last couple of months. And for builders, their margins aren't that big. Usually it's below 20%, sometimes even thinner. And not just that, it's not just the cost, it's the time frame. Increasing demand from timber supplies and steel supplies across the nation has seen cases where wait times go from 2 weeks to 2 months to even long, which is going to further delay builds. Further to your point, Jayden, the cost of building materials has soared by 26.1% on average in the past 12 months. Raw material prices have risen a staggering 50% in just 10 months, and international freight costs have doubled. It's crazy because it's affecting everything from steel reinforcing for concrete slabs, timber for fencing, cladding, flooring, roofing, doors, fitting, anything in their home uses those raw materials. Home owners and renovators could be facing cost blowouts of up to 30 to 50 grand plus. And that's just the raw cost. This isn't factoring in the time. The time to build could double or even more. For example, roofs that normally take 8 to 10 days to deliver here have blown out to 4 or 5 months. Basically, there's buildings sitting there that can't be built because they don't have the materials to build them. Yeah, I had a client this week who was midway through his build. They were up to the part of putting the roof, like the trusses on the roof, and it was meant to be a timber frame, but they couldn't get timber. And every time the builder was getting updates, they were relying on the supplier, and the supplier kept pushing back and back and back. And now here we are 8 weeks later, and he still can't put a roof on because they don't have the timber to put the trusses on. So it's a huge problem that's impacting a lot of people across the building industry. 100%. I guess anyone wanting to build or renovate should understand there's going to be increased costs and material delays. So how long is this going to last? Now this is going to go on for another 12 to 18 months at least. Industry experts are saying it could go well into 2022 before the industry starts to return to normal conditions. Industry is also going to see an extended delay and shortage in materials and trades, which is going to flow on to higher costs for new homes and renovations. So what's this mean for you? Well, the first is to expect delays. That's just going to be a given, particularly with all the shortages going on at the moment. The second, if you're not in a fixed price contract, expect additional costs. If you are in a fixed price contract, be aware that the builders could go broke or they might actually cut corners elsewhere because of the increased costs associated with the build. It's not to say that they're all going to do that, but the fact is if you signed a contract 12 months ago and prices for materials have gone up 30, 40, 50%, they're going to have to cut corners somewhere because otherwise they're running a huge loss. And if, like most builders, they've got 4, 5, 15, 10, 20, 30, a lot of projects going on the go, they're gonna have to cut corners somewhere to try and make this work and run a sustainable business. And while we've spoken about before on the apartment and development market, building defects have been a problem for a long time, and now there's the risk of them becoming even worse. Yeah, we only need to look at the Mozo Property Pain Building Defects Report in 2019. Most apartment and house owners who purchased a new property in the last 10 years have experienced defects. Not some, most. Australia's been plagued by building defects for a long time. Yeah, unfortunately, it's easy for developers and builders to cut corners when they're the ones in charge of their own regulatory body. The sad truth is whether you're buying a new apartment or home, you should budget for repairs for the most common defects that plague properties. Don't assume you'll escape these problems, because you won't. One of the largest builders in Launceston, Tasmania, agrees that cutting corners is a major risk at the moment. Stephen Simone from Tas City Build says, "There's a lot of builders going out on their own, making the most of these times, and if they're not controlled, something is going to happen." Now here are some defects that you might actually find. The most common is cracking from the internal to external structures. This accounts for about 42% of defects. The next is guttering faults, defective plumbing, internal water leaks, tiling problems, and water penetration from the outside. Now how much is this going to cost to fix? Mozo survey showed 5% had to pay more than 20 grand for the repairs. 68% paid 5 grand and 27% paid between 5 and 20 grand to fix the problems they had with the properties. You may be able to get your builder to fix these issues, but maybe not. Worries and warranty. What you're entitled to. Although buying a home is probably the biggest purchase you'll make in your life, don't assume that the builder will be standing alongside you if cracks start to appear. Depending on which state or territory you're in, if you purchase your property, there might actually be different warranties that may apply. Yeah, it's actually wild the differences. So for example, in New South Wales, major defects are covered for 6 years and all other defects for 2 years. In Victoria, structural defects are covered for 6 years and non-structural for 2 years. In WA, defects are covered for 6 years following the building's completion. In South Australia, claims can be made up to 5 years following the building's completion. In Queensland, work is covered under home warranty insurance for 5 years and 6 months, but after you lodge an application for assistance, the scheme's strict time frames apply. Owners have 3 months to lodge a complaint for structural defects and 7 months for non-structural defects, so be careful of that. In the Northern Territory, you can claim defective building work for up to 10 years. However, issues that sit outside the National Construction Code, such as poor workmanship and minor cracks, are not covered. In Tasmania, structural warranties last for 6 years from the building completion. But be warned, just because those warranties are there doesn't mean your builder will follow through. For an idea of how bad it can get, let's take a look at the story of Charlie Henty. Charlie built his dream home on the outskirts of Launceston in 2015. But 6 years on, he's still waiting to have his defects repaired. He had a number of issues, including a problem with the bathrooms, where he's actually had to spend an extra $100,000 on repairs. The builder made a cursory effort to fix the problems, but ultimately stopped responding to him. Yeah, it's pretty terrible. His only recourse now is to take the builder to court. And there's no guarantee he's gonna win. Crazy. We'll include a link below. It's got the full story. Check it out if you're thinking about building. So should you build a home right now? As you can tell, I'd recommend against it. You're looking at high costs, delays, and a chance that your property will either have some defects or the builder could even go bankrupt. Yeah, it's funny. I think the thing that a lot of people get caught up when you're building a new home, especially if you're first home buyer, is the grants. You're going to get the $15,000 first homeowners grant. There's obviously no home builder now. You potentially can get your LMI waiver. It's all really exciting, but the things they don't think about is that, well, it could take 6, 9, 12 months, maybe longer at the moment to build. So you're still having to pay rent for somewhere. You're still having to pay interest and repayments on the home that you're building while you're doing it. So it doesn't end up working out super cheap. I guess the argument can be, well, maybe you can buy something cheaper, you get a bit more value, but then you got to think about, well, if you've got to go further outside, there might not be infrastructure, you might have to buy a car, if you can't commute to work, there's a lot of other things there. Not to mention that, you've got to look at the areas in which a lot of the buildings are happening and the fact that they might not actually be landlocked. So you might buy in a stage 1, 2, or 3, but in the future they keep releasing land, and that has an adverse impact on the value of your property, because that land, you can find a newer property just as close to your property where you've now built. The property value is not going to increase as much as you like. So I think overall, definitely think about all those risks with some of the benefits in buying your own home. It's great having your own place, making everything how you want it to, but at the moment, given where the costs are and the risks of having material shortages, not to mention labor shortages, maybe reconsider the timing and look at the alternatives. So what's preventing you from qualifying for a home loan? Here at Hunter Galloway, we get home loans approved. So if you're living in Australia and looking for a mortgage broker, we can help. Visit us online at huntergalloway.com.au or call us on 1300 088 065 and we'll see you next time.